Hello and welcome to our Masterclass by Open Up. My name is Gabby and we're very excited that you're here today with us joining a masterclass about happiness. If you're joining us for the first time or you're a returning viewer, at Open Up we're on a mission to make mental well-being accessible to all. And one of the ways in which we do this is by organizing these monthly masterclasses on a topic related to our mental well-being. Today's masterclass is about the science of happiness. And Meike Bartels, a biological psychologist and professor of genetics and well-being at VU University Amsterdam, is here today to host this session. Meike will explore a fundamental question: how can we be happy? Before we jump into the masterclass, a few technicalities. So you will see at the bottom right corner of your screen a chat function. Here you can interact with us and also with each other. There's also a polls function because we're going to have a couple of interactive polls throughout the session. And then after you vote, you can see the answers in this little polls tab at the bottom right of your screen. And lastly, all of our masterclasses are live. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A with Meike. So if you have any questions that are coming up that you would like to ask Meike, you can do so in the bottom right corner in the questions tab. This way, when you submit your question, if other viewers also find it interesting, they can upvote your question and it's more likely that we're going to be answering it at the end of the Q&A. Now, without further ado, enjoy this Science of Happiness Masterclass with Meike.
Welcome everybody to this masterclass. And Gaby just introduced me. My name is Meike Bartels. I'm a professor in genetics and well-being at the VU University in Amsterdam. And I'm also the co-founder and co-chair of the Foundation for Wellbeing and Human Potential called Explore It. And with the foundation we try to build a society based on well-being. Well, happy you are here and I'm going to take you along my journey to understand better why some people are happier than other people. And what we can learn from that and how we can be a happy person ourselves. Well, when I started studying happiness, that was just after I finished my PhD. And my PhD focused on psychopathology, problem behavior and the development of those in children. And during my PhD, I actually saw that most of the children in our society do well. So I thought, well, let's focus on the majority of people that feel well and that do well. And so I started studying well-being. Well, diving into the literature, this is a research field that has been going on for about 30 years, I found a couple of basic findings. First of all, happy people are healthier. They live longer, they function better, and they have stronger social relationships. Well, those things are very important and fundamental to our society. Also importantly, those things don't have a clear direction of causation. If you feel well, you live longer, but if you live longer in good health, you're of course happier. So what we try to find out is what comes first, happiness or any other things. We see society currently as a well-being society, meaning that what we try to do, what we try to achieve is always with the aim to become happier. The pursuit of happiness. It has been the title of many books and many movies, and that's how we live. So what we do is we try to tick the boxes. On an everyday basis or on a yearly basis, we try to achieve what we want with the aim of becoming happier. Well, based on the research in the field of positive psychology and my own research, I think we should turn it around. I think we should create a society based on well-being, where well-being comes first. And if you feel well, if you function well, you are creative, you are open, and you're there for society. And you can give your full potential to society. So actually, to my opinion, well-being is a catalyst. So we should start with well-being. We should know what makes us happy, and we should know what makes other people happy. Well, that is the big question of today. How do you become happy? What are the drivers for happiness? Well, to give a very simple example why I think well-being is a good starting point, this is a very famous study from the UK, where they looked at the famous relationship between money and happiness. It's well known around the world that countries that have a higher socioeconomic status, a better economy, have more people that are happier. So there seems to be a link between money and happiness, and we always think that money will make you happy. Well, in this study, as you can see on your screen, they looked at 3 age groups. They started with 16-year-olds and they asked them how happy they were. Well, the light blue bar are the happiest persons in the 16-year-old group, and the dark blue bar are the less happy persons. They repeatedly this design, and when they were 18, they asked again who's happy and who's not. And again at 22. Then they waited for a while, and when this group turned 29, they asked them about their income. And what you can clearly see in those diagrams is that the ones that were happier when they were younger earn more money when they were older. So in this case, happiness makes money. And of course, there are many factors in between your well-being at age 16 and your income at age 29. And these things are making the right life choices, knowing who you are, knowing who you want to be, knowing what you're good at, and also knowing what you're not good at. Important life lesson. So happiness can come first. Differences in happiness, that is important. So if we look at our society, some people are always happy. Some people are somewhere in the middle, and of course we have people that have mental problems, mental illness symptoms, depressive symptoms. And these differences do exist. The majority of our people that are painted in gray on this picture, which is not the most happy color, but they are smiling, are the people that are happy. And if you put our society, Europe for example, into a population distribution, it will look like this. If you ask people, can you please rate your life from 0 being the worst life you can imagine to 10 being the best life you can imagine, you will see that some people say my life is worth a 10, some say a 7, some say an 8, and some people go down to a 3, a 2, or a 1. Well, the red people are the ones with mental problems. The orange ones are the ones that are very important for our society and are on the verge of tumbling over to the mental health problems. By knowing how to become happier, by knowing why we are all different, we can actually maybe shift this population. So if we don't do anything, we will get more and more people with mental problems. That's what we already see in our society to happen. If we focus on well-being as one of the factors that make people happier, we can probably shift this distribution to the better side. Meaning that we have more people that feel well and that function well, and have less people with mental problems. So we should learn from those who do well, and we should learn why people are different. Well, I'm not the only one, of course. There are many people studying well-being, and there are many huge governmental organizations that have well-being as their top priority. For example, the World Health Organization, UNICEF. And what they often do is looking at groups of people. So they compare two groups, and for example, are people happier when they live in a city, or are people happier when they live in a smaller village? Are people happier when they do a lot of exercise, or are people happy when they do a bit of exercise but also sit down for a while? Are people always happier when they eat healthy food? And for example, a very important question for society, what's the relationship between the use of our mobile phones and well-being? Well, these studies actually never give us a right answer. And that's due to the fact that when you compare two groups, you tend to ignore that the people in these groups are all different. So some people want to exercise every day to become happy, while other people want to exercise twice a week. Some people get very strong social connections by using their phone, while other people are totally addicted to phone use and actually ignore all their life social relationships. So all these factors are different for people, so we can't stick to this one-size-fits-all approach. We should understand why some people are happier. So look at the differences. Well, the answer to this important question, why are some people happier than others, is very simple. The difference between people in happiness or in anything that you can measure is due to an interplay of your genetic predisposition and your environmental exposure. So your genome and the exposome. Holds for everything. So if someone asks you about the nature-nurture debate, it doesn't exist. It's always nature, it's always nurture, and there's always this interplay. Also for well-being. What I'm going to explain to you now is how do we know that genes are important for well-being, and how do we know that the environment is important? But let's start with a question to you. How strong do you expect the effects of genes to be for happiness? You have to choose. There are 4 options, and it varies from, okay, genes are important, but they explain only 10%, to, well, genes are very important, and they explain about 60%. And then you have the 20 and the 40 in between. So People are still voting, so we wait till people are done with voting. Yes, well, a very interesting mix of answers. That's always good. I'm glad to see that, although because I just told you so, genes do matter for everything measured. The minority of you thinks it's only 10%. And most of you think it's about 40%. So somewhere in between, in the middle, is the genetic effect. Well, I will get back to that in a couple of slides. So I'm going to talk about the genome. If you talk about genes, if you talk about heritability, it's all about the genes that are in every cell of your body. Well, I will not go down to the DNA level, although we found genes for happiness, but I will describe how strong these effects are. And the field of well-being actually had a very nice kickstart, if you talk about genetics and well-being. Because the first study on the effects of genes, the heritability of well-being, was based on a sample of identical twins that grew up apart. So that's two identical persons that grew up in totally different environments. And when they came together for this study protocol, they were assessed on anything you can measure in a human being, also happiness. And what they found, which was striking to many of us, is that people that are genetically identical but never saw each other are still more similar at the level of well-being than normal brothers and sisters. So if you grew up in your family with your brothers and sisters, you have a different level of happiness, and you're more different than two people that never saw each other but have the same genotype. And it's a very, very strong evidence, the most strong design we have in the field of genetics, to show that genes matter. And in these studies, we indeed found that about 40 to 50% of the differences in well-being are accounted for by genetic differences. Well, luckily, studies that are based on twins that have been separated at birth don't exist anymore, because it's forbidden to separate twins. They should grow up together, of course. But there are many, many twin studies around the world. We also have a very large twin register at the Department of Biological Psychology, the Netherlands Twin Register. And these twins voluntarily provide us with information about anything, also their level of well-being. And based on the twin studies in the Netherlands, but also twin studies in the UK, in the United States, in Australia, in Asia, in Latin America, we all get the same answer. And we all see that 40% of the differences between people in well-being are accounted for by genetic differences. So a substantial amount of the differences is due to genes. However, this also shows that the environment is very important. 60% of the differences is caused by environmental factors. But we don't know what kind of environmental factors, and we also don't know what environmental factors work for whom. But first, importantly, actually always, when I talk about the heritability of well-being and say it's 40%, people translate this to themselves and say, oh, okay, that means that 40% of my happiness is stuck in my genes and I can't change it, and 60% is to be changed. That's not what I said. I talked about differences between people, so this is incorrect. 60% of the differences in well-being between people is accounted for by environmental difference. But some people have a high genetic predisposition, and some people have a low genetic predisposition. So some people have an easier life to become happy than other people. Secondly, if something is heritable, it doesn't mean it can't change. So what is heritable is the differences between the people on the screen. The person that gives a 10 to his life has a higher genetic sensitivity, vulnerability, predisposition to become happier. The one that gives a 2 or a 1 has a lower. But you can shift this whole population if you give them the handles to become happier. So it doesn't mean it's deterministic. It gives you a certain sensitivity and you can always change. Well, that's about the genome. So the heritability of well-being is 40%. Genes do matter. We also found genetic factors really on the DNA level. We also found that these genes are expressed in the human brain, especially in the hippocampus. And we are now putting a lot of effort in understanding the biological pathways from these genes to the behavior and the feeling of well-being. Well, that's work in progress. So stay tuned for the coming years. It will take a while. But next to that, we want to understand the environment. We want to understand what environment is important for whom. Well, what we tend to do in environmental research is that we pick one environmental factor and link that to well-being and say, okay, people that live in greener areas are happier or not. Well, the environment is way bigger than only looking at a greener area. So what we try to do is understand the complexity of the environment and link that to well-being. So we took 7,000 people, and based on their postal code, we added all their environmental variables, and we had a satisfaction with life measure. Important disclaimer, we used information of the environment based on your postal code, meaning that that's only the environment you're exposed to when you're at home. And as you know, you're not always at home. So it's also not a perfect study. But we looked at several categories of environmental factors. So for example, how green is the area? Is there air pollution? Is there a lot of green space? What are the possibilities for cultural experiences like cinemas, theaters? The socioeconomic status of the neighborhood. How many houses are for sale? How many houses are for rent? How many houses are there per square kilometer, for example? How easily is the area accessible? How many education possibilities are there? How many sports facilities? What is the livability? That's a combination of social cohesion and safety of the neighborhood. And how many care facilities are there in the neighborhood? And are these factors important for well-being? Well, before I give you the answer, it's up to you again. So what environmental factor do you expect to have a strong effect on well-being? Well, I see the votes coming in. Not many people voting for sports facilities. Could be due, of course, to the fact that it's postal code. And if you want to have a sports facility, you can go, of course, in another postal code area. It's also a Dutch study, so everything is close by. But I see a mix of answers. The green environment is the runner-up. That is the most studied environmental factor for well-being around the world, with mixed evidence so far. And the winner of this voting is safety. And that's the good news. I will show you what the results of our study were. What you see on your screen, don't get overwhelmed by all the colors and the dots. What you see on the screen on the horizontal axis is the category that I just mentioned. So air pollution, theaters, socioeconomic status, care facilities, accessibility. And there are different factors in these categories. What you see on the vertical axis is the outcome of the statistical test, not very important. But what you should understand is that the higher the dot in the diagram, the more important it is for well-being. So if we start at the left side of this picture, you can see that the factors that we had that actually reflected the green space or the healthy status of the environment are not important for well-being. Air pollution, greenery is not important in our study. Probably because if you want to be in a green area, you can go to another postal code zone. What pops up to be very important is all socioeconomic factors related. So it's socioeconomic status is, as we already know, very important for well-being. We see that within countries, we see that all around the world. So that's not of a surprise. What the surprising finding of this study was, when you correct for these socioeconomic status factors, both at the neighborhood level as well as at the individual level, that the factor that kept on being important for everybody is indeed safety. So regardless of the socioeconomic status of your neighborhood and regardless of your own socioeconomic status, safety is an important factor for well-being. Well, we consider this as being a very important finding because it's important for everybody and it's something you can intervene on. So governments, policymakers can work on well-being of neighborhoods, and they should be aware that they should work on well-being in all the neighborhoods if they are interested in safety, if they are interested in well-being of their individuals. So I talked about the genes and said, well, 40% of the differences is in your genes. I talked about the environment and came up with safety as a very important environmental factor. But you should always realize that your genotype and your environment don't act independently. So there's always this interplay, and that's also a reason why a one-size-fits-all approach, intervention, or whatever you want to achieve will not work because everybody is different. To give you the simple example of gene-environment interplay, gene-environment interaction in this case. The example is if we all go out into the sun in the middle of the summer at the exact same spot for the exact same duration of time. So for example, for an hour in the middle of Amsterdam in the sun. Then things will happen to you. Some people get a very nice sunny tan, other people get sunburned, and some people don't have any effect. You have the exact same sun, environmental exposure at the exact same time for the exact same duration. But you have a different effect. The different effect is completely induced by the differences in skin type. Skin type and pigmentation of your skin actually makes the effect of the sun different. What is the underlying source of your skin type? Your genotype. So the environmental effect can be similar for everybody, but your genotype actually influences the effect of the environment on you. And that holds for many things. So even though you want to try to change something with an environmental factor, the effect on people is different due to the fact that they are genetically different. So this is a big example of sun and skin, but you can also think in any interaction with individuals. If you want to bring something across, some people will accept that and others won't, due to their genotypes. Another example of gene-environment interplay is gene-environment correlation. And that means that people have sometimes double advantage. They get a genotype from their parents, the genes for happiness from their parents, and these parents are happy and create a positive environment. That's double advantage. On the contrary, there could also be double disadvantage. So people can get the genes for mental problems from their parents, and one of their parents might suffer from mental problems, double disadvantage. It's not that we can change these mechanisms, we should just realize that they exist. We should constantly realize that someone else is different and you don't know the genotype of the individual and you don't know the environment. So you don't know if there's double advantage or double disadvantage. And the whole system of inequality in the world is based on this model of double advantage and double disadvantage. And we should acknowledge that if we want to make a change. So always realize and never be judgmental. Another factor of gene-environment interplay is that the environment responds to you based on your genotype. So for example, to give the simplest example, the shape of your face, the size of your eyes, the position of your mouth, makes your face looking friendly or not. And then on a scale from very friendly to not friendly at all. The shape of your face is completely dictated by your genotype. Your behavior, if you're like a very open and friendly person or a more closed person, is driven partly by your genotype. And the environment responds to you. So also in the environment responding to you, realize that your genotype plays a role, but also in your interaction with other individuals. If you see a certain response, realize that that person is actually a genotype and you are a genotype and you're interacting with each other. Well, to summarize, happiness is heritable. We have found that all around the world, and actually the important message is that some people are happier than other people, and it's for some people easier to be happier than other people. But the environment is also important. 60% of the differences is accounted for by environmental factors. There's always this interplay. So that makes every individual unique, and we should realize that. And importantly, if something is heritable, it doesn't mean it can't change. And we'll get back to that with well-being interventions in a couple of seconds. So importantly, well-being is heritable, everybody is different, and if we start respecting these differences and be open to differences, we can all become happier people. Well, so what? What can we do about our happiness? How can we train well-being? How can we try to become happier? Well, there's a list of evidence-based well-being interventions that you could try. Because we are all different. Some work for some, others work for others. So try and also stop if it doesn't work. So for example, the first is writing letters of gratitude. So writing a letter in which you gratitude someone, a situation, something, and give that person also the letter. What are you thankful for? Who changed your life in a positive way? Well, some people really like that, and some people really get a burst of happiness when they do so. It's not something that fits me, so I tried it, but it didn't work for me. Count your blessings. That is the second one. Be actually happy with what you have. Don't always try to achieve more. Sit down is the official intervention. Sit down every night and write 3 to 5 things down that did make you happy that particular day. Well, for most people that will not work. Sitting down every night is very strict. Writing 3 to 5 things down every night is very strict. But you could actually internalize this in a certain way. And I do this when it's like rainy, which is often in the Netherlands nowadays. When I have a very busy schedule and if I don't feel in control, I start thinking, okay, I count my blessings. This is going well, this is going well. I'm having this very nice event today, for example. So I use it in my own way, but it's based on count your blessings. The third one is a very nice one. You can do that with your family, with your colleagues, with your friends, and that's practicing optimism. Try to change everything you say and write into an optimistic way. You can start by scanning your email before you send it off. Read it once again and see if it's an optimistic tone of voice or not. Talk about opportunities. Talk about bringing people together, talking about the future, and it helps. You can really change interaction with other people if you act in a more positive and optimistic way. Performing acts of kindness, doing something for someone else without having any effect for your own sake at that particular moment could be very helpful. Do some extra cooking for the neighbors. Give a cup of coffee to someone back at you in the line. Helps sometimes. Give it a try. And the last 2 are actually the most important ones. Because well-being is heritable, this means that you are a particular person. You are unique. So you can be most happy if you stay close to yourself. Who you are, who you want to be, what are your skills, and what don't you like. What should be stopped in your life to stay happy. And it's also a matter of values. And what is your value in life? What are your principles? And try to live along these standards. And that's of course easier said than done because we have a complex society. Although we say we have a liberal society, it's still complex. So try to understand who you are and who you want to be and where your strengths are. That means that you can make changes to your life. You are the ones that actually has the agency to make your life. Give it a try. Don't make big life changes immediately. Try to sort out what makes you happy. Try to find the energizers and get rid of the energy drainers in your life. Well, then about interventions in general. So often when I talk about well-being interventions, people think, well, yeah, should I try it? And should I try them all? Should they work all? Well, well-being interventions are not different than any other intervention. They are not different than the regular exercise. So some people like to exercise indoors, while other people like to exercise outdoors. Some people like to do endurance training, while other people like to do strength training. Everybody's different. So also for these well-being interventions, try them. And importantly, stop when they don't make you happy. And secondly, everybody is different with respect to trainability. So for example, this is a schedule of running the marathon in Rotterdam, but it could also be the marathon in London or in New York, whatever. There are these fixed training schedules. And every year, a lot of people start at the exact same moment with the exact same training schedule. Well, what happens? First of all, many people drop out because they get injured or whatever, or they get demotivated, or they realize this is not what makes me happy. Perfect reason to stop the training. But some people make it, and some people do run the marathon. And for example, these 2 ladies did run the marathon of Rotterdam in 5 hours and 3 minutes. Well, exceptional to do that, to finish. And then a couple of hours earlier, someone finished the marathon in 2 hours and 6 minutes. So that's actually twice as fast, or even faster. What is the main difference between the 2 ladies and this guy? The interplay of genetic predisposition and environmental factors. They have a completely different genotype. They have a different body composition. They have a different physiological system. They have had a different training schedule because they were capable of doing different things. They have been raised in a different environment with different support, with different aims. So it's a full combination of genes and environment that in the end gives you different results. Well, You don't have to be the world champion leader in well-being in the end, but realize that you are different than anyone else and that any training could have a different effect on you than it can have on another person. So most importantly, to finish my story off, is that we realize that we are all different. And difference is important in society, but differences and embracing differences start by acknowledging that everybody you interact with on a daily basis is different than you are. And to give a very simple example, and something I do myself very frequently, and is not the right way, is by if you did read a good book, or went to a nice restaurant, or did see a nice movie, what you tend to do is say, this is a good book, you should read it. Or go to that restaurant, it's lovely. Or yes, you have to go to that movie, it's amazing. And that's actually ridiculous. What you should say is, I thought it is a very good book. I really enjoyed it. Give it a try. Because someone else is different than you are. If you try to understand differences in that way, I think we together can create a better world and a society based on well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meike. Very, very interesting masterclass. A lot of information. And especially the last example, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm that person that says, oh, this is an incredible restaurant, incredible, book. And then when people do watch it or try it and they don't like it, I almost feel personally offended. It's like, oh, but I liked it so much. Yeah. We had a lot of great questions coming in during the Q&A and during the masterclass. So let's kick it off. The first question is from Stephanie, and she asks, how can we find out what environmental factors can help us specifically based on our genes the most?
Yeah, it's actually a matter of trial and error. We are, actually developing in the field of genetics, and hopefully in the future at some point we really can measure genes and their interaction with the environment, but that will take a while. It's really by trying, and sometimes that's hard because for many environmental effects you don't know the effect on your body. For example, if you think about air pollution, it has a strong effect on some people and not on others, but you will never find out till you develop a certain disease. So there's a lot of unknowns, but in general, if the environment makes you feel comfortable, go there. And it's not that everybody likes the same environment. That's what we tend to think. We think that everybody wants to go to the seaside. Well, some people say, well, I actually rather go to the forest, or actually I'm a city person. So just listen to yourself and listen to how you feel when you are in certain environments.
All right, kind of treating it like an experiment.
Yes, life is an experience, experiment and a journey. So never stop exploring that.
Absolutely. Okay. Another question from Thais. How do I begin to start understanding myself and which values are important to me? Or better yet, what is my value?
Yeah, that's a very important one. And that's really by opening up yourself to talking to people and also experience how that makes you feel. So start a discussion with your friends about trust. What is trust? What does trust mean to you? What does trust mean to other people? And then you will see and find out that we have different ideas about trust and we have different views on trust. And based on that, you can develop your own value. How important is trust to you? How important is inclusivity to you? And of course, that's not easy because everybody say, I love trust and everybody should be inclusive. But you really should feel, is that what I think? And what do you mean by being inclusive? Everybody, of course, as a human being wants to be inclusive, but you can have different standards and different values. But that also means that you will find out maybe that some of your friends have different standards and values, which is not a problem. You just have to respect it. But it's really an exploration from you to society with other people. Don't do it alone, but think about it. Give yourself the room to think about happiness, trust, inclusivity, and don't run at the speed of life that you actually don't acknowledge all these things. That's actually what we often do. But
it sounds like kind of like the different hats that you can try on, right?
Yeah.
And see how it fits. Okay. A question from...
And it's not static, so you develop. So at some point when you have certain principles and values and you get older or you have been in a certain environment or encountered a certain experiment, that can change. It can change your life. It can change your values, your principles.
Yeah.
But it's nice you can sit down and actually write down, okay, if I see value, trust as a value, what principles should I live and what would my behavior then be? Write it down to yourself and see if you can then live following these principles or not. Well, if not, then you should change them.
Yeah. Wow. And I think also, Thijs, since you asked this question, we have group sessions exactly on this, determining your values. So I think it might be helpful. A question from Renske. Is this safety only related to neighborhood violence or also financial safety? And also Hans asks a similar question. What is the definition of safety in the context? Low crime, chance of war? What are the factors?
Yeah, in this combination, in this study, it's a combined measure of objective measures of indeed crime in a neighborhood and subjective experience of people feeling safety. So safety comes out of the study. The next important step would be is to go to neighborhoods and again talk to the people. Okay, safety is important. What is safety for you? For some people, it's, for example, having more light in the darker hours. For some people, it is having a broader area to bike on, for example. So safety is a very complex thing. So it doesn't stop by finding safety as being an important factor for well-being. It actually starts there. We now have to explore, okay, what is safety meaning and how can we actually create safety for everybody while safety is different for everybody.
Okay. Wow, a lot of different factors that go into it. It's not just one word, but all of the different descriptors.
Yes.
Chiara asks, what role does clinical depression play when it comes to happiness?
Yeah, well, we did a very large study on the genetics of well-being in combination with the depressive symptoms, and we see a very strong overlap. We call that a genetic correlation. It's 0.7, meaning that a large part of the genes that are important for well-being are also important for happiness, for depressive symptoms. But we also see some unique aspects of the genotype. So it is partly the other side of the same coin, but partly well-being is something different, something more than only the absence from clinical depression. But given the strong link, I think it has a lot of opportunities to also focus on well-being to actually help someone who suffers from depressive symptoms instead of only focusing on getting these symptoms out of the way.
Yeah, and would it also then mean also looking at the environment aspect? Because if somebody's more, let's say, predisposed to have depression, then I guess should the emphasis be even stronger on the environment?
Could be. It really depends. That's really like a personalized approach to help someone to find out if it's the environment or if it's more biologically driven. If maybe then medication would be a better solution. And there is no one size fits all in that sense. Yeah,
unfortunately, I think a lot of problems would be solved if there was a one size fits all. A question from Igor. What if your work is stopping you from reaching happiness through other activities, but at the same time you need to work to keep some aspects needed for happiness, like financial security?
Yeah. That is always tough. That's really, if you have this balance and you say, okay, I'll spend part of my time earning money to do the things that I like, there's nothing wrong with that model. On the longer term, I think trying to find a job that you do like and that makes you happy, in the end will make you happier because people spend a substantial amount of hours at their works. Though I would say, but it's easier said than done because indeed, of course, we need to earn money to live. So you can try in a stepwise approach, say, okay, but what kind of work would I do that makes me at least happier than what I do now? And then continue. These things are easier said than done, but you should realize that you spend a lot of hours at work. So if that's only energy draining, in the end, I think it's not the solution. Yeah,
I think kind of links to what you said right at the beginning of your presentation, that instead of focusing on like ticking the boxes to be happy, it's more like you take the happiness as like a base and then from there move.
Yeah, and that is actually what you also see in life choices, that people, you should think that a choice that you make can lead to a lot of things, but if you make the choice in a happy status, it's often a better choice.
Yeah. Wow. So have to make decisions when you're feeling.
Yeah, we
good?
often make decisions when we're unhappy. That's the strange thing. We make big life decisions when we don't feel well. But we should actually make the life decisions when we feel well and feel well, and not when we feel unwell.
Yeah. Oh, that's really
it's hard, but
that's really important indeed. Yeah. Then, all right. Interesting question from Carolina. She asks, "What actions can we take to modify the genes in our future children?" If any.
If any, yeah. No, we can't take any actions, and I think that's for the better. We have a lot of developments in gene editing, which are crucial to cure kids from terrible illnesses. So that's, I think, a beautiful development. Given the complexity of well-being, so we already found over 350 locations at the human genome. And if we have bigger studies, it will probably be a couple of thousand. So we will never be able to do so. We don't have to be afraid that we will create like the wonder baby that's always happy.
The perfect happy baby.
Yeah, the perfect happy kids. Of course, to make our children happier is to realize they are all different. And we should start actually in the environment, changing the school system, and don't make everything one size fits all. Realize that even within your family, your children are different and don't need the same things as altogether. So,
and I guess instead of only focusing, which of course is not realistic to focus on how to change the future genes. Also, as a parent, right? Like, how does the child observe you in relationships? If you're happy as a parent in your job, what does that say to your child about working
and
life?
Give the good example. But realize your child is not a exact copy of who you are. We all have these pictures on how we want to raise our children and how we want them. Well, if you talk, for example, about exercise, we're very used to actually bringing our child to the same exercise as we tend to do, which is nice, but maybe not the right way. Really start with your child. Okay, are you like an individual sports, or do you like a team sports? And of course, there are values in everything. There's value of being part of a team. There's value of doing things on your own. So that's also not static. Try it and see where your child flourishes.
Yeah, it's kind of like the struggle sometimes you see when parents want the child to do the same career that they were doing.
Exactly.
Like, I'm a doctor, so you should have that legacy, in the family, and also become a doctor.
That is not good for the well-being of the next generation, and that's actually a big pressure on many people, also in big companies, as if it's a family company.
Absolutely.
And that is hard to change, but that starts with, I think, the parents to realize that your child is not an identical copy of who you are.
Yeah, so instead of only relying on the society, kind of seeing what you, as a person, but also as a parent, right, can take more ownership of, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. A question from Gustavo. You've mentioned genetics and environment. Where does the psychological makeup fit in the picture? For example, traumatic experiences, ways you were raised, relationship with parents, etc.
Yeah, exactly, on the interplay. The fascinating thing is that we consider a lot of things environmental, while they're actually driven by genotypes. And that's due to this interaction. So if you talk about parenting, you think that it is an environmental factor on the child, but it's completely evoked by the child. So everybody that has multiple children knows that the parenting style that you use for one child is completely different than the parenting style for the other child. And you started off, before you had children, with this ideal style that you actually never use. So it's totally evoked by the child and the genotype of the child. So the genotype is always included in the mix. Genotype of the child, your own genotype, if your parenting style is based on your own genotype. So there is no clean environment. So, for example, also socioeconomic status, that we always consider an environmental factor in the field of economy, for example. That consists of your educational level and your income. Your cognition is largely based on your genotype. So in socioeconomic status, there's genotype included. So there is no clean environment, maybe air pollution, but that depends on where you live, and where you live depends on your income, and that depends on your IQ. So there's always this mix of genes and environment.
Yeah, it's not simple. Sounds so many different factors, a lot of complexity for sure. We have time for one last question, and the question is from Tara. Does that mean, in regards to your presentation, does that mean that looks actually do matter because you will be treated differently as a result and therefore might be happier or more sad?
Yes. And looks do matter, and there are also studies that show that, for example, symmetry of a face is something that more people like than asymmetry. And indeed, some people, I always, when I travel around, I see people with a friendly face. Some people have a very friendly face, and then I walk up to them and say, can I take a picture of your friendly face? And I explain that I tell about the shape of a face. And then I ask them and say, well, I think that you have an easier life because everybody considers you to be a friendly, happy person. And they often say yes. So, well, here's to the plastic surgeon who can now start changing
a whole
everybody.
Industry of people wanting to have symmetrical faces.
Symmetrical, happy faces, yeah.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And
but in the end, it's your facial expression is part of how you feel. So it brings you back to if you be who you are, if you be who you want to be, you are the person you are, and then you have another effect on the environment than if you are not who you are. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be looking in the mirror being like, do I have a symmetrical face? Am I approachable? And I guess if you don't have a perfectly, of course, symmetrical face, at least smiling, right? Or again, taking action to make yourself be more friendly and open.
Well, if you look at pictures that are taken of you in certain situations, and sometimes you think, oh, this is a nice picture, and it's always when you are in a happy situation, when you feel happy, because it's not only the shape of your face, it's really feeling happy that actually is shining on pictures, for example. So that brings you back to, be who you are and do what you like. And,
that's a beautiful way to close it off as well. Just be who you are and do what you like. Meike, thank you so much for this really, really fascinating masterclass. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and your interaction. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next masterclass.